Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 169. Wait a minute. Yes, it is day 169. Let's see. It is the 22nd, I do believe. Tuesday. At least I know I got the right day. At least I know it's Tuesday. And I know it is TowerGate day 169. Thank you so much for tuning in. A lot to get to in a short period of time here. So we're just going to tick them right off. One thing right after another. It never ends. So these stories are not necessarily in the order of most importance. Just kind of is how I go through them. So you can decide what you think is most important. I really don't know anymore these days. They're all important to some extent. They're very important. So let's just get started with the first story that I was looking at. And this is from True Pundit. Great site. And it's being reported that British spy behind the Trump-Russia dossier, Christopher Steele, could be forced to talk after a U.S. court ruling. A recent ruling by Judge Ursula Nguro will allow lawyers for Alexei Gubarev, that's the man who's suing Christopher Steele and BuzzFeed, Alexei Gubarev, to seek British approval to question former MI6 agent Christopher Steele about the funding and the sourcing for his dossier. These are really the crux to the two important issues, which I'm sure Trump and his attorneys will be listening very closely, watching this trial very closely to get the answers to these questions that speak to these two issues, which is the funding and the sourcing. Now, this is pretty much a done deal. It would be extraordinary if the British court did not approve this request. This is basically just a matter of, going through process. This is done all the time. And so it's about a 98% sure that the British judge is going to approve that, which means that Christopher Steele, if you remember the last time we talked about this issue, his attorneys were fighting as hard as they could to keep Mr. Steele from having to testify. But that is not going to happen. Christopher Steele is going to have to be testifying. And it looks like Mr. Gubarev's attorneys are going right for the jugular. Because let's face it, they're getting right to the heart of the matter. And it's the same heart of the matter type questions that we need to get answered for the things that we're pursuing here, which are slightly different than what Mr. Gubarev is going for. But the information that he wants is just as valuable to those of us who are following this story, certainly to Trump and anyone who really wants to know who put together that dossier. Because remember, we are learning from Christopher Steele, or at least this is what he's saying now, from the last time we talked about Christopher Steele about a week ago. He's now stating that he didn't write the dossier, that he only packaged it, put it together for Fusion GPS, and that the material came to him unsolicited. Very important, unsolicited. What he's saying is that I didn't go to them, they came to me. This is a crucial point, and it's something that I'm sure Mr. Gubarev's attorneys will ferret into to try to find out exactly what he means by that, because that's quite the statement to make. It turns the whole thing on its head. Up to this point, we've been led, up to that point a week ago when we talked about this, we had been led to believe that Christopher Steele went out and pursued the sources, that he put the thing together, wrote the thing, and all that. Now he's saying, oh no, I didn't write it, I just packaged it, arranged it, put it in order. Oh no, I didn't actually go out and investigate all this and find all these sources. No, they came to me. You see, this tells us a lot. This tells us an awful lot. So Mr. Gubarev's attorneys are going to try to find out about the funding and the sourcing for his dossier. And you can be about 98% sure that the British court is going to rule that Mr. Steele is going to have to talk. He is going to have to answer some questions. So we'll just keep following this story. It's critical to the overall narrative that we've been following here since the very beginning on TowerGate. So it's a very important piece of breaking news, which is not being covered anywhere in the mainstream media or even many alternative media sites. But obviously, I'm sensitive to the TowerGate issue, the surveillance issue, the dossier, Christopher Steele. These are all things I've spent a lot of time following and looking at. So that's why I'm a little more tuned into this than some other people may be. So that's a very important piece of breaking news from the True Pundit. Here's a little tidbit for you. The Reverend Hillary Rodham has paid Huma Abedin nearly $65,000 from campaign funds, her 2016 campaign funds, since her defeat in the 2016 election. Still continuing to pay Huma. Gotta wonder why. I guess, I don't know why she's still on the payroll. The election's over. Has been for a long time. I know Hillary got $1.2 billion. I guess she's got a lot of extra cash laying around. Maybe throw some of it at Huma, even though Huma's already independently wealthy. $65,000 to her. Didn't she say that she carries $65,000 purses? One different one every day of the week? That's a new purse for Huma. Yes, indeed. CNN, who is still struggling to work itself up above the Yogi Bear reruns and ratings, attempts to normalize Antifa, saying that they seek peace through violence. Now, a lot of people had a lot of fun with that on Twitter over the weekend. Peace through violence. That's extraordinary. I mean, it's just one of those things, phrases that you hear that sounds okay until you stop and think about it for just a few seconds. Peace through violence. Wait a minute. I don't think that's right. Of course it's not right. It's stupid. Peace through violence. Now, I'm sure a lot of you watched some of the coverage of over the weekend, and you saw CNN and MSNBC and the liberal media gloating about how wonderful it was, how peaceful everything was there in Boston. Yes, there was no murder. There was nothing like that happened. There was no great outbreak of massive violence on a large scale. But if you listen to the Boston police, it wasn't quite as friendly as being advertised. The Boston police are talking about having had quite a few run-ins with Antifa. We're also finding from a video clip that I stumbled onto, some of you may have seen, where Antifa and Black Lives Matter actually got into a fight between themselves. And the way that happened was apparently a black man who was part of Black Lives Matter went up to an Antifa guy and said, "Hey, why don't you guys take off those masks?" And the response from the Antifa guy was to simply sucker punch the Black Lives Matter activist right in the side of the head. It's right there on video. And so this goes back to the point I made a couple of days ago where I was saying that the Democrats and the liberal media, the left-wing pundits, they are going to seriously regret hitching their wagon to Antifa. They are going to seriously regret this. It will come back to bite them in the ass because Antifa is a nasty group of people. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. And what's really going to be, this is way down the road, but I'm telling you this is going to happen. When we get to the 2020 campaign and you actually have the Democratic process going, Democratic Party process going back to the convention where they go to their convention to, nominate their pre-selected corporate candidate, you're going to have a lot of nasty stuff happening there. The progressives are already gearing up for it. You will see Black Lives Matter and Antifa both getting all mixed up in this group of protesters who will be largely progressives protesting against the establishment candidate, protesting against the Democratic National Committee for the nasty games that they play. Because the games that they played in 2016 on Bernie will be played again on any other progressive, maybe Bernie again. Bernie's stupid enough to get duped twice? Absolutely. His supporters probably as well. But I can tell you that in 2020, you are going to see a lot of these leftist groups, when they're all thrown into a big pile together, and there's no so-called right-wingers or KKK or alt-right or anything like that, at the Democratic National Convention in 2020, when they're getting together to have their convention and elect or select their corporate Democrat, you are going to see a lot of nasty stuff break out there, and it'll be blocks away from the convention center, obviously, but it will certainly happen. And this is what, and I think that you're going to see more of this happening, which is you're going to see Antifa and Black Lives Matter coming more into conflict with one another, because they have largely different goals. You have radical elements within Black Lives Matter, but you also just have a bunch of useful idiots and dupes, and probably some pretty nice people who just want to be a part of something that they think is important, but there are just too many nasty elements mixed into their group, too many violent elements mixed in. And now that the liberal pundits and liberal media have decided to hitch their wagon to these two groups and defend them and talk about how they want peace through violence, and trying to sell them off as the victims as opposed to the antagonizers, is again, this will come back and bite them, because what you're going to see is these two groups now are going to be vying for attention, and they're really different groups. Antifa is not doesn't have the same platform as Black Lives Matter, and so now that they've been thrown together, their differences are going to come out, and they are going to start taking each other on head to head. And so what you're going to have is direct violence going on between Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And it will be very difficult for the liberal pundits, the liberal media who've jumped on this bandwagon. It will be difficult for them to backstep out of this thing. They're already locked in. We've got them in print. We've got them on video. We've got them basically admitting that that they think that supporting these groups, saying that they're peaceful groups, they're trying to have peace, and it's opposition to fascism, it's opposition to the KKK and all this. They're going to find, and they're going to have to admit at some point, that that has nothing to do with anything. These people have a whole different agenda, and we all know who's funding them, don't we? Just keep watching. You know, here's an interesting little thing that popped up again over the weekend, and it's not something that was recent, but it's just something we're learning about from Representative Louis Gohmert, who is a Republican from Texas, I believe, and he's a pretty good guy. He's kind of a neocon, but you could do a hell of a lot worse than Louis Gohmert. So anyway, Louis Gohmert has recently revealed that Paul Ryan told congressman on a conference call, Republican congressman on a conference call prior to the vote in 2016, that this was like 2 to 3 weeks before the vote in November, that Paul Ryan on a conference call told many Republican congressmen that they should be focused on countering President Hillary Rodham Clinton and coming up with ways to hold her accountable, because Donald Trump couldn't win the White House. Also, he told Republican members to ditch Trump and said that he was abandoning the then GOP nominee Donald Trump forever. Now, this is just, we didn't need to hear this from Louis Gohmert. We already knew it, just like the WikiLeaks emails. We already knew what was going on there. But this just solidifies what we've already known. Now, for Louis Gohmert to come out and say this, it's a pretty dangerous thing for him to do, in terms of the fact that he does head a committee, or he sits on a couple committees, and Paul Ryan's probably not going to like that, having said this. But this is no secret. It's obvious that Paul Ryan is playing for the other team. It's obvious that he's obstructing and doing everything he can to do as much damage to Trump as possible. But it's pretty extraordinary that Gohmert would share what would generally be regarded as a sort of a private conference call between the speaker and other Republicans. But he's telling us that Ryan was telling these people on this conference call, hey, distance yourself from Trump, ditch him. Hillary's going to win. We're going to be voting here in a couple weeks. She's going to be the president. Let's start working on ways to counter her And by the way, I'm a never Trumper, and I'll always be a never Trumper. So this is the position he's staked out, and it's pretty obvious by his behavior, and it's pretty obvious. Of course, we learned yet from yesterday's video that he may be, if the WikiLeaks emails that we're being told exist actually do exist, that Paul Ryan may be one of those people who was on the payroll of the Hillary Clinton campaign to participate in the takedown of Trump after his inauguration. We need to defeat Paul Ryan. Paul Nehlen is the Paul we should be voting for, and we'll be working very hard on that, I can assure you. Paul Nehlen, keep that in mind. This is kind of a funny story here. It appears that a radical leftist threatened to smash actor James Woods, who is a conservative, actor James Woods over the head with a 2x4. Woods saw the link. Woods was able to follow this link to this guy's Instagram account, and he got his name. His name is Matthew E. Jacob. He is of Manhasset, Long Island, New York. His Twitter account has now been suspended because James Woods reported him to Twitter. Also, James Woods is stating that he will be contacting the FBI and filing a complaint, as well as the police, and he will be pressing charges against Matthew E. Jacob of Manhasset. Now, whenever you make a threat like that, especially when it's across border, you make a threat to someone outside of your state, it now becomes a federal issue. Not just a state issue, it's a federal issue. And because Mr. Woods was apparently in California, and Mr. Jacob lives in Manhasset, Long Island, which is where the threat came from to smash Woods over the head with a 2x4, James Woods is now going to pursue this fully. Now, here's one thing you generally do not want to do. You do not want to screw with a guy who's got quite a bit of time and a hell of a lot of money and an IQ of about 180. James Woods, in case you don't know, was going to be a doctor. He graduated from MIT in the top 10 in his class. James Woods is a very, very smart dude and a conservative, and he doesn't like being threatened by people on his social media accounts. And he certainly understands how to use social media because he tracked this guy down in a very, very short period of time, and he had all his info pretty quickly. So Matthew Jacob looks like he better lawyer up and get ready for a visit from the FBI and his local police. He's going to be facing charges, and he's guilty. You can see his threat right there. James Woods posted it right there on his Facebook and his Twitter. You can see it. The threat's there. It's across state lines. It's a federal offense. And Mr. Jacob will probably be doing a little time. He'll certainly be getting harassed, that's for sure. He's going to have some legal fees, I can assure you that. Now, let's touch on something else here. As you know, Mitch McConnell, Twitch as I call him, has been in a feud with Donald Trump. I told you that he would not win that fight. I said Twitch is going to lose this fight, mainly because on this particular issue, like it or not, Trump is right. And everyone knows it. Twitch had 7 years to come up with a plan for repealing and replacing Obamacare. He's had many years to put together a plan for tax reform and tax cuts. They talk about it all the time, don't they? But we now can see that they have no plan, because they never had a plan. They never had intentions of doing any of it. They were surprised as anyone that Trump won, and now they have to produce. And of course, the only thing these people produce is what? Lies, war, and debt. But now they have to produce something else called results. Thank you. So now Mitch McConnell, my good friend Twitch, goes back to Kentucky to raise some money. And what does he find? Well, I told you his poll numbers were taking a hit. Well, now we actually have those poll numbers taken by a independent polling group in Kentucky. And they're finding Mitch McConnell has now an 18% approval rating in his own state. and a 74% disapproval rating. 74% disapproval rating. They don't show many undecideds here. There can't be many undecideds. 74 and 18, that's 92. Not many. Basically, Twitch McConnell is getting a very, very hard lesson learned. And it kind of piggybacks onto another story that popped up, I heard on the radio from Hugh Hewitt. For those of you not familiar with Hugh Hewitt, he is a neocon. He is a neocon. Hosted one of the debates. And Hugh Hewitt went to a Republican fundraiser where there were lots of large donors. This is the donor class, my friends. This is not the factory worker. This is not the laborer. This is not the lower middle class or even middle class. These are the rich people. These are the ones who typically are part of the establishment. These are ones who give a lot of money to candidates, people like Twitch McConnell and others. The donor class, they usually kind of hover over everything else, and most things that affect middle class and average people don't really affect them too much. They got a lot of money, they got a lot of time, they got a lot of friends, they got friends of political power. They're the beautiful people, I guess you would say. And so Hugh Hewitt is expecting, he goes and he's there to give a speech, and then people are going to make donations. But he finds that after he gives a speech, he's doing a question and answer session. And this is actually being reported by Hugh Hewitt himself. He says that he was absolutely shocked and alarmed. He said that 98% of the people hitting him with questions were pretty upset and were hitting him hard on why he was not defending the president on his radio show. Now, he doesn't really attack Trump so much, but on his radio show, I do hear it occasionally. He's not, Trump gets attacked much worse from other media sources, and he is, a neoconservative, so on defense issues and things like that, he likes Trump and stuff like that. He don't even seem to mind the tweeting, but he will call him out on some things. But just the fact that Hugh Hewitt has not been 100% behind Trump, he was taking serious abuse. This is from Hugh Hewitt himself, saying, man, I gave a speech, and I was expecting normally people ask me these types of questions. He said, but they were hostile. I finished my speech and I was taking questions, and they were hammering me, every single person, hollering at me, why aren't you supporting the president? So this is what Twitch McConnell was also learning, and I'm telling you, this is the mood across this country in all those red states that Trump won. This is what everybody is thinking. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's not just those of us who gather around this channel. It's not just people and maybe who watch The Hard Bastard or Styx or any of these other people or watch Hannity or whatever, Limbaugh. It doesn't matter. You don't need anyone to tell you what's going on. It's very, very obvious. People are quite upset about it. They're quite aware of what's going on. But more importantly, they are holding the correct people to task. Years ago, this just would have been left versus right. This just would have been, okay, it's Democrats attacking. But you would never say anything about another Republican attacking. Oh, no, we can't do that. Especially one who's connected to the establishment, the neocons, and is about doing a lot of fundraising. But here was a fundraising dinner where Hugh Hewitt himself is the guest speaker and the guy who's going to be getting people to sign checks. And he didn't say how much money he raised, but he certainly told us about the reception he got, and he was shocked and horrified at how many people were hammering him for not defending the president. And I'm telling you, this is the mood of the country, and it's going to continue building and building and building through 2018 and 2020. Twitch McConnell, you better pay very close attention. Republicans in Congress who are now back in your home districts, hiding from your voters, hiding from your constituents. You cannot hide on election day. We will find you on election day on that ballot. You can be assured of that, sir. Absolutely correct. Let's see. Here's a funny story. Yeah, you guys probably heard about this over the weekend. The USS John McCain collides with a merchant ship in the Pacific. It wasn't just a merchant ship, man. This was a freaking oil tanker. I took a look at a picture of it. It's a big ship. Big ship. So the guided missile destroyer, the USS John McCain, crashed into a merchant vessel. It was an oil and chemical tanker, actually, near Singapore. Now, the thing is, this is not actually, the ship's not actually named after Senator Magoo. It's actually named after, it was named after his father and grandfather. It's like a joint ceremony. It was named after the two seniors, McCain, his father and grandfather, not him. Certainly not Magoo. Magoo is not worthy of having a ship named after him, especially based on the wet start little gag he tried to pull on the aircraft carrier that resulted in the death of hundreds of sailors, many injuries, damage to the ship, 4 airplanes pushed overboard. No, I don't see Senator Magoo getting anything named after him. No, I do not. Except maybe a guillotine or something. Let's not forget, it was Senator Magoo who went and got that dossier. And we're now learning from Christopher Steele that he didn't write it. He only put it together. And he didn't go out and look for the info. It came to him. Keep your eye on that ball. I wonder if it was any of John Brennan's friends, like Hillary Clinton and Senator Magoo, that were actually feeding that information to people who were then giving it to Mr. Steele. Maybe Mr. Steele was just the middleman in all this. That's how he's going to play it. It's all he's got. Believe me, there's much more to learn about the dossier. Everybody thinks we know everything about it. Not a long shot, friends. There's a lot more to learn about that dossier and John McCain and John Brennan's role in creating it. Mark my words. Finally, the Reverend Hillary Rotten has recently formed, this is about 3 months ago, we're just now learning about it. The Reverend Hillary Rotten formed an organization, and she began the organization about 3 months ago, and it began with her initial funding of $800,000. $800,000 is how she started this organization. The funding, the initial funding, $800,000. It's called Onward Together. I'll be looking into that. Onward Together. I'll be researching Onward Together to find out a little bit more about Hillary's new plan. But apparently, according to sources close to Reverend Rotten, the goal of Onward Together is to involve itself in direct action and protest. Direct action and protest. Where do you think Hillary got the $800K? $1.2 billion in her campaign fund. She's buying Huma a $65,000 purse, apparently every now and then. Awful lot of money. We know that the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative has dried up. I think they've shut the doors on that now that Hillary is not Secretary of State and she can no longer deliver favors, which is the only reason anyone gave them any money anyway. Once she was no longer Secretary of State and no longer going to be president, no reason to give Hillary and Bill any more cash. So they shut the doors on the place. But apparently the cash is still rolling in. Does anyone think it may be a certain Hungarian man with a lot of extra cash laying around who's already involved in an awful lot of funding of organizations that creates chaos, sometimes leading to the overthrows of governments, full-blown revolutions, civil unrest, murder and mayhem? Need to look into this. Onward Together, find out where that funding is really coming from. The Clintons are way too freaking tight to pull it out of their own ass crack. This is coming out of someone else's money vault. My guess is it's George Soros. What do you think? appears to be what we have for today. That's right. Yes, covered that. Very well. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been TowerGate, day 169. Tuesday. I believe it's the 22nd. It better be. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much more to cover tomorrow evening. I'll be back with you then. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Yeah, guys, take care. Bye.